when Marilyn Monroe begged Sinatra for help. His answer changed her forever. The phone rang at Frank Sinatra's Palm Springs compound at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in July 1961. Frank was still awake. Insomnia had been his companion for years, sitting by the pool with a tumbler of Jack Daniels, watching the desert stars and thinking about nothing in particular. When the phone rang at this hour, it was rarely good news. He walked inside and picked up the receiver. Yeah? There was breathing on the other end, ragged and uneven, like someone trying to collect themselves enough to speak. Then, a voice he recognized immediately, fragile as spun glass. "Frank, it's Marilyn." Frank's entire body tensed. He knew that voice. Knew what it meant when Marilyn Monroe called in the middle of the night, sounding like she was barely holding herself together. They'd been friends for years, had dated briefly after her divorce from Joe DiMaggio, had remained close even as their romantic relationship faded into something more complicated. Part friendship, part concern, part something neither of them could quite name. "Marilyn, what's wrong?" Frank's voice shifted immediately from the casual drawl he'd been wearing all evening to something sharper, more focused. "Where are you?" Her voice caught. "I'm at my house in Brentwood. Frank, I'm sorry to call so late. I know I shouldn't bother you, but I didn't know who else." She broke down into sobs that made Frank's chest ache. "You're not bothering me. Talk to me. What happened?" I can't do this anymore, Frank. I can't keep being her. Being Marilyn Monroe. It's killing me. I'm so tired. I'm so goddamn tired of all of it." Frank felt ice water run through his veins. He'd heard variations of this from Marilyn before, but something in her voice tonight was different. More desperate. More final. "Stay on the phone with me," Frank said, already moving toward his bedroom to throw on clothes. "Don't hang up. I'm coming over." "No, you don't have to." "I'm coming over, Marilyn. We're going to talk about this. Face to face. You understand me? Don't do anything until I get there." "Frank, promise me, Marilyn. Promise me you'll wait for me." There was a long silence. Then, in a small voice, "I promise." "Good. I'll be there in 2 hours. Keep talking to me while I get dressed and get on the road. Tell me what happened tonight. What triggered this?" Frank cradled the phone against his shoulder while he pulled on pants and a shirt, listening to Marilyn's fractured narrative. She'd been at a dinner party in Beverly Hills, some producer's event where everyone was beautiful and successful and fake as hell. People had treated her like a decoration, a trophy to display. "Look, we've got Marilyn Monroe at our party." But nobody had talked to her like she was a real person. Nobody had asked her how she was doing, what she thought about anything that mattered, whether she was happy. "They just wanted pictures," Marilyn said, her voice thick with tears, and what Frank suspected was a substantial amount of pills and alcohol. "Wanted to be seen with me. Wanted to tell their friends they'd met Marilyn Monroe, but they didn't want to meet Norma Jean. They don't even know she exists." "I know she exists," Frank said quietly, pulling on his shoes. "And Marilyn, I need you to listen to me. I'm walking out to my car right now. I'm going to drive to Brentwood. It's going to take me about 2 hours because I'm in Palm Springs. But I need you to promise me, really promise me, that you're going to be there when I arrive. That you're not going to do anything stupid between now and then. I'm not going to kill myself, Frank." But her voice lacked conviction. "That's not good enough. I need you to promise me, with everything you've got. Promise me you'll be there, alive and able to talk to me when I knock on your door." Another long silence. Frank's heart was hammering. He'd started his car, was pulling out of his driveway, phone still pressed to his ear, even though it was ridiculously dangerous to drive and talk like this. "I promise," Marilyn finally said. "I'll be here." "Good. Now stay on the phone with me. Tell me about, I don't know, tell me about something good, some happy memory. Anything to keep you talking, keep you present." Marilyn started talking, her voice drifting in and out of coherence about her childhood, the parts before the foster homes and the abuse, the small moments of happiness she could remember. Frank drove through the desert night, keeping her talking, keeping her anchored, terrified that if he let the conversation lapse for even a moment, she'd slip away into whatever dark place was calling to her. 2 hours had never felt so long. Frank pulled up to Marilyn's house in Brentwood just after 5 a.m. The sun was starting to think about rising, the sky shifting from black to deep blue. He'd stayed on the phone with Marilyn the entire drive, listening to her talk in circles about her life, her fears, her exhaustion with being a symbol instead of a person. He knocked on the door, not too loud, didn't want to alarm the neighbors, and waited. For a terrible moment, there was no response, and Frank's mind went to the darkest possibilities. Then he heard movement inside, the sound of locks being undone, and the door opened. Marilyn Monroe stood in the doorway wearing a white terry cloth robe, her famous platinum hair disheveled, her face bare of makeup and swollen from crying. Without the armor of cosmetics and styling, she looked younger and more vulnerable than her 35 years. Looked like the frightened girl from the foster homes rather than the world's biggest sex symbol. "You came," she said, her voice small and surprised, as if she hadn't quite believed Frank would actually drive 2 hours in the middle of the night, just because she'd called. "Of course I came." Frank stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "When you call me like that, when I can hear in your voice that you're in trouble, nothing could have stopped me from coming." Marilyn's face crumpled, and she moved into Frank's arms, sobbing like a child. Frank held her, this woman the whole world wanted but nobody seemed to actually know, and let her cry. He didn't try to shush her or tell her everything would be okay, or offer any of the empty platitudes people usually deployed. He just held her and let her release whatever had been building up inside. Eventually, the sobs subsided. Marilyn pulled back, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her robe. "I'm sorry. I'm a mess." "You're not a mess. You're human. There's a difference." Frank guided her to the living room couch, sat down beside her. "Talk to me, Marilyn. Really talk to me. What's going on?" Marilyn curled up on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller, to protect herself from something. "I don't know how to explain it. It's everything and nothing. She struggled for words. "Frank, do you ever feel like the person everyone knows isn't actually you? Like you've created this character, this persona, and it's taken over your life to the point where the real you has disappeared?" Frank thought about that question, about Frank Sinatra versus Francis Albert from Hoboken, about the chairman of the board versus the insecure kid who'd clawed his way to the top and was constantly terrified of falling back down. "Yeah," Frank said quietly. "I know exactly what you mean." "Then you understand. You understand what it's like to be so famous that you can't be yourself anymore. To have people looking at you constantly, judging you, wanting things from you, but never actually seeing you." Marilyn's eyes were distant, focused on something Frank couldn't see. "I created Marilyn Monroe. Norma Jean created her. And she was supposed to be, I don't know, armor maybe? Protection? A way to be beautiful and desired and successful when the real me had been told she was worthless her whole life. But the armor became a prison," Frank said, understanding. "Yes, exactly, yes." Marilyn looked at him with something like relief, like finally someone understood. Everyone wants Marilyn. Nobody wants Norma Jean. And I'm so tired of being Marilyn, Frank. I'm tired of the voice. She demonstrated, shifting into that breathy little girl voice that had made her famous. "This isn't how I really talk. It's an affectation, a performance. But everyone expects it now. If I talk in my normal voice, people are disappointed." "So, talk in your normal voice." "It's not that simple. Everything about Marilyn is performance. The hair color. I'm naturally brunette, you know. The walk, the clothes, the whole persona. And the studio owns her, Frank. They own Marilyn Monroe. They control her image, her career, her life. And I'm just trapped inside her screaming to get out, but nobody can hear me over the sound of the performance. Frank lit a cigarette, offered one to Marilyn, who took it gratefully. They sat in silence for a moment, smoke curling between them in the early morning light filtering through the windows. You know what the worst part is? Marilyn asked eventually. I'm good at it. I'm really good at being Marilyn Monroe. And there's a part of me that loves it, loves the attention and the admiration and the success. But there's another part of me that hates it, that feels like I've sold my soul for fame and now I can't get it back. You haven't sold your soul, Marilyn. You've compartmentalized. We all do it. The person we show the world versus the person we are in private. It's just that for people like us, the gap between those two people is bigger. The performance is more intense. The stakes are higher. But how do you live with it? Marilyn leaned forward, desperate for answers. How do you stay sane when you're playing a role 24 hours a day, when the person in the mirror isn't who you really are? Frank was quiet for a long moment. This was the question he'd been asking himself for years, the fundamental tension of his own life. How do you stay yourself when the whole world wants you to be Frank Sinatra? You find people who know the difference, Frank said finally. People who've seen you without the performance. People who know Francis Albert as well as they know Frank Sinatra. People you can be real with. I don't have those people, Marilyn said, her voice breaking again. Everyone in my life wants something from me. My agents want me to work. The studio wants me to be profitable. The men I've dated... She laughed bitterly. They either want Marilyn Monroe, the sex symbol, or they want to fix broken Norma Jean like she's some kind of project. Nobody just wants me. The actual me, whoever that is. That's not true. I'm here. And I don't want anything from you except for you to be okay. Don't you? Marilyn looked at him skeptically. Come on, Frank. We both know how this works. Everyone wants something, even you. Frank felt that like a punch to the gut, partially because there was truth in it. He dated Marilyn partially because she was Marilyn Monroe, because being seen with her had elevated his own status, because there was something intoxicating about being close to that level of fame and beauty. But over time, as he'd gotten to know the woman beneath the persona, something had shifted. He'd started caring about Norma Jean, started seeing the frightened girl hiding behind the platinum hair and the breathy voice. Maybe at first, Frank admitted. Maybe when we first met, I was attracted to Marilyn Monroe, the image. But Marilyn, I'm sitting here at 5 in the morning because you called me in crisis. I drove 2 hours through the desert because I was worried about you. That's not about your persona. That's not about what you can do for my career or my image. That's about... He stopped, struggling with the emotion. That's about caring whether you live or die. That's about not being able to stand the thought of a world without you in it. Marilyn's eyes filled with tears again. Why? Why do you care? Because underneath all the bullshit, the fame and the performance and the image, you're real, you're vulnerable and hurt, and trying so goddamn hard to be both Marilyn and Norma Jean. And it's tearing you apart. And I recognize that struggle because I live it too. Maybe not to the same degree. Maybe my performance isn't as all-consuming as yours. But I understand what it's like to feel like you're losing yourself in the persona you've created. They sat in silence again, the sky outside growing lighter, the world starting to wake up around them. Somewhere in the distance, Frank could hear birds beginning their morning songs, could hear the early commuters starting their cars. I don't know how to keep doing this, Marilyn said quietly. I don't know how to keep being her when I'm not even sure who I am anymore. And that was when Frank made a decision. He'd come here prepared to talk Marilyn down from whatever edge she was on, to convince her to keep going, to remind her of all the reasons life was worth living. But looking at her now, this beautiful, broken woman who'd been performing for so long she'd lost herself, Frank realized that the conventional advice wouldn't work. The "don't give up" and "it gets better" platitudes wouldn't reach her. What Marilyn needed was honesty. Brutal, uncomfortable, potentially devastating honesty. The kind of truth that might shatter her completely, but might also be the only thing that could save her. "Marilyn, look at me," Frank said, his voice gentle but firm. "Really look at me. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. Really hear it. Can you do that?" Marilyn nodded. Her eyes locked on his. "You're going to die young," Frank said. Marilyn flinched like she'd been slapped. "I'm not saying that to be cruel," Frank continued. "I'm saying it because it's true, and I think part of you already knows it. The pills, the drinking, the depression, the way you're living your life, if you keep on this path, you're not going to make it to 40, maybe not even to 37. You're going to become another tragic Hollywood story, another beautiful star who burned too bright and too fast and died young." "Frank, let me finish." Frank's voice was intense now, urgent. "You're going to die young unless you make a fundamental change. Not a small change, not just cutting back on pills or seeing another therapist or taking a vacation. A fundamental change in how you're living your life and who you're trying to be." Marilyn was crying again, but she was also listening with an intensity Frank had rarely seen from her. "Here's what I think," Frank said. "I think you need to kill Marilyn Monroe." Marilyn's eyes widened. "Not literally," Frank clarified, "but metaphorically. I think you need to walk away from the persona that's destroying you. Stop trying to be Marilyn Monroe, the sex symbol, the image, the studio creation. Let her die. Let Norma Jean live instead." "I can't just... That's my career. That's my livelihood. That's everything I've worked for." "It's killing you," Frank interrupted. "Everything you've worked for is literally killing you. So the question becomes, what's more important? The career or your life? The fame or your sanity? Marilyn Monroe, the image, or Norma Jean, the human being? That's not fair. You're asking me to choose between everything I am and..." "No," Frank said firmly. "I'm asking you to choose between everything you've pretended to be and everything you actually are. There's a difference." Marilyn was shaking now, her whole body trembling with emotion. "You don't understand. If I walk away from Marilyn, if I stop being her, I'll have nothing. No career, no money, no identity. I'll be nobody. You'll be yourself, and maybe that's terrifying. Maybe that's the scariest thing in the world. But Marilyn, being yourself can't be worse than what you're doing now, because what you're doing now is dying by inches. You're calling me at 3 in the morning talking about how you can't keep going. You're taking pills and drinking and having breakdowns because the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be has become too wide to bridge. So yeah, walking away from Marilyn Monroe is scary. But staying on this path, that's not scary. That's fatal." Marilyn stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. "You're asking me to give up everything. My career, my image, my place in Hollywood. I'm asking you to save your life." Frank stood too, moving to block her pacing, forcing her to look at him. "Marilyn, if you keep on this path, you will die. Not metaphorically. Actually die. And the world will mourn Marilyn Monroe, will turn you into an even bigger legend in death than you were in life. But you'll be gone. Actually gone. No more chances to figure out who you really are. No more opportunities to live as yourself. Just gone." "I don't know who I am without her," Marilyn whispered. "I've been Marilyn Monroe for so long I don't remember how to be Norma Jean." "Then you learn again. You figure it out. You take time away from the cameras and the studios and the performance, and you remember who you were before all this. Or maybe you discover someone completely new. But either way, you stop trying to be Marilyn Monroe and you start trying to be a real, complete, authentic human being." The studio won't let me. Fuck the studio. Frank's voice was harsh. Seriously, fuck them. They don't own you. They own an image, a persona, a creation. But they don't own your soul. They don't own your life. And if they think they do, if they try to keep you in a cage that's killing you, then you walk away. You break the contract. You retire. You do whatever you have to do to survive. I'll be broke. So you'll be broke. Better broke and alive than rich and dead. I'll be forgotten. Bullshit. Frank grabbed Marilyn's shoulders, making her look at him. You could walk away tomorrow, never make another movie, never appear in public again, and you'd still be Marilyn Monroe in people's memories. You've already achieved immortality. The only question is whether you're going to live long enough to enjoy it, or whether you're going to become another tragic Hollywood statistic. Marilyn was sobbing openly now, all the defenses stripped away, all the performance dropped. She was just Norma Jean, terrified and vulnerable and desperate for someone to tell her what to do, how to survive, how to escape the prison she'd built for herself. I don't know how, she said through her tears. Frank, I don't know how to do what you're suggesting. I don't know how to kill Marilyn and let Norma Jean live. I don't even know if I can. Frank pulled her close, holding her while she cried. Then let me help you. Let me be there while you figure it out. You don't have to do this alone. Why would you do that? Why would you help me destroy the person you were attracted to in the first place? Because I'd rather know the real you than worship a fantasy. Because I'd rather have you alive and unknown than famous and dead. And because Marilyn, or Norma Jean, or whoever you want to be, I care about you more than I care about your image. They stood there in the growing morning light, two of the most famous people in the world, holding each other like drowning people clinging to wreckage. Outside, the world was waking up. People were starting their days. Life was continuing on without any awareness of the crisis unfolding in this Brentwood house. Eventually, Marilyn pulled back, wiping her eyes. What do I do? Practically. How do I actually do this? Frank thought for a moment. First, you stop the pills. Today. Right now. Whatever you're taking. Sleeping pills, painkillers, all of it. You flush it down the toilet. Frank, I need them to sleep. No, you need them to escape. There's a difference. And if you can't sleep without them, then you don't sleep. You lie awake and you feel everything you've been trying to avoid feeling. Because that's the only way through this. Not around it, not over it. Not drugging yourself into unconsciousness. Through it. Marilyn looked terrified but nodded slowly. Second, you take a break from work. Tell the studio you're sick. Tell them you need time off. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. But you stop performing. Stop being Marilyn Monroe for public consumption. Give yourself space to figure out who you are when you're not performing. And what do I do during that time? Whatever you want. Read, paint, garden, learn to cook. Do normal things that normal people do. Rediscover what it's like to just be a person instead of an image. And third, Frank smiled slightly. Third, you find people who know you as more than Marilyn Monroe. People who've seen you without makeup, who know your real voice, who understand you're more than the persona. And you hold on to those people like your life depends on it. Because it does. People like you? People like me, yeah. But not just me. You need a support system. Real friends. Maybe a therapist who actually understands what you're dealing with. People who can help you navigate this transition from Marilyn back to whoever you really are. Marilyn was quiet for a long time, processing everything Frank had said. Then, you really think I can do this? You really think I can walk away from Marilyn and survive? I think if you don't, you won't survive anyway. So the question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you're brave enough to try. And if I fail, if I try to be Norma Jean and discover there's nothing there, that Marilyn really is all I am, then you'll deal with that when you come to it. But Marilyn, Norma Jean, I don't believe that. I've seen you when you're not performing. I've heard your real voice, seen your real smile. Talk to you about things that have nothing to do with Hollywood or fame. There's a person there. A real, complicated, interesting person. She's just been buried under the performance for so long that you've forgotten she exists. I'm scared, Frank. Good. Being scared means this matters. Being scared means you're taking it seriously. I'd be more worried if you weren't scared. Marilyn walked to the window, looking out at the morning sun fully risen now, at the ordinary Tuesday beginning in the neighborhood around her. If I do this, if I really try to walk away from being Marilyn Monroe, will you be there? Will you help me? Every step of the way, I promise. Why? Why would you commit to that? Frank moved to stand beside her at the window. Because I've spent my whole life watching people I care about destroy themselves. I've lost friends to drugs and alcohol and the pressure of fame, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of watching talented, beautiful people burn themselves out because they can't find a way to be both famous and human. So if I can help you avoid that fate, if I can be there while you figure out how to survive in this business without losing yourself, then that's what I'm going to do. They stood together watching the morning, and Frank felt something shift in Marilyn's energy. The desperate, suicidal edge had dulled. She wasn't fixed. Frank wasn't naive enough to think one conversation could solve years of trauma and identity crisis. But she'd been given something to consider, an alternative to the path she'd been on. Okay, Marilyn said finally. Okay, let's do it. Let's kill Marilyn Monroe and see if Norma Jean can survive. The weeks that followed were brutal. Marilyn called the studio and told them she needed a medical leave. They were furious, threatened lawsuits, but Frank had his lawyers involved, and eventually they backed down. She flushed her pills down the toilet like Frank had insisted, and the withdrawal was hell. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, shook and sweated and suffered through the detox while Frank stayed with her, talking her through the worst moments, reminding her why she was doing this. She dyed her hair closer to its natural brunette, stopped wearing the tight dresses and heavy makeup, started using her real voice, deeper and less breathy than the Marilyn Monroe voice, but more authentic. And slowly, painfully, she started to remember who Norma Jean had been before Hollywood had transformed her into Marilyn. It wasn't a magical transformation. She had setbacks, bad days when she wanted to go back to the pills, wanted to put on the platinum wig and the red lipstick and be Marilyn again, because at least she knew how to do that. But Frank was there, reminding her why she'd chosen this harder path, helping her stay committed to becoming herself again. They spent hours talking about childhood, about dreams that had nothing to do with Hollywood, about what kind of life she might want if fame wasn't the primary goal. Marilyn started reading again, books she'd always meant to read but never had time for. Started painting, something she'd loved as a child but had abandoned when her career took off. Started taking walks in the early morning when nobody was around, just being a woman in the world instead of Marilyn Monroe, the icon. And slowly, gradually, she started to heal. It wasn't complete healing. Frank didn't think it ever would be. The damage ran too deep, the trauma too extensive. But it was progress. It was the beginning of a journey from persona back to person, from image back to identity. One evening, about 2 months after that night when Marilyn had called him in crisis, they sat by the pool at Frank's Palm Springs compound. Marilyn wore jeans and a simple blouse, her brunette hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup except a little lip gloss. She looked different, less glamorous maybe, but more real, more present, more herself. "You saved my life," Marilyn said quietly, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in oranges and purples. "You saved your own life. I just gave you permission to try. That's not true and you know it." Marilyn looked at him, and her eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been in years. "That night, if you hadn't come, if you hadn't told me the truth about where I was heading, I would have taken more pills. I was so close, Frank. So close to just ending it all because I couldn't see another way out. But you didn't. You chose to live. You chose to fight for yourself. Because you told me how. Because you gave me a path forward that wasn't just try harder to be Marilyn or learn to cope with the pressure. You told me to kill the thing that was killing me. That was... She struggled for words. That was the bravest thing anyone's ever said to me, and the truest. You're doing the hard part. I just pointed you in a direction. Don't diminish what you did. You could have told me what everyone else tells me. Take a vacation, see a therapist, get more sleep. But instead, you told me the truth. That I was dying. That the path I was on was fatal. And that the only way to survive was to fundamentally change who I was trying to be. That took courage, and I'll never forget it. Frank reached over and took her hand. So what now? What's next for you? I don't know yet, and that's okay. I'm learning that I don't have to have everything figured out. I don't have to have the next 5 years of my career planned. I can just be, just live, just figure out who I am day by day. Marilyn smiled, and it was genuine. Maybe I'll make another movie someday. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll be Marilyn again, but on my terms, not the studio's terms. Or maybe I'll just be Norma Jean and live a quiet life away from all of this. Either way, you'll be alive. That's what matters. Yeah, Marilyn said softly. I'll be alive. Because of you, Frank Sinatra. Because you cared enough to tell me the truth, even when it was brutal. Even when it meant telling me I was going to die if I didn't change. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting and the desert night took over, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. Two of the most famous people in the world, just being human together, no performance necessary. History records that Marilyn Monroe died in August 1962, just over a year after that night when Frank had driven through the desert to save her. The official cause was probable suicide from an overdose of barbiturates, though conspiracy theories would swirl for decades about what really happened that night. Frank Sinatra was devastated by her death, blamed himself for not doing enough, not being there when she'd needed him most. He'd tried, had stayed in contact with Marilyn through the following year, had checked on her regularly, had done what he could to support her as she navigated her complicated relationship with fame and identity. But ultimately, Frank couldn't save her. Nobody could save her. Because the forces arrayed against Marilyn Monroe, the studio system, the expectations of fame, the trauma of her childhood, the impossible burden of being the world's biggest sex symbol, were too powerful, too entrenched, too destructive. But for those months when Marilyn had tried, really tried, to be Norma Jean again, she'd been happier than Frank had seen her in years. She'd laughed more, smiled more genuinely, seemed more at peace with herself. And Frank carried that with him for the rest of his life. The knowledge that for a brief time, he'd given Marilyn Monroe something nobody else had been able to give her. Not a way to be a bigger star, not a way to be more successful or more famous or more beloved, but a way to be herself. A way to be human instead of an image. A way to choose life over the slow suicide of performance. It hadn't been enough to save her permanently. The darkness had eventually won, as it so often did in Hollywood. But for those precious months, Marilyn had been free, had been real, had been Norma Jean more than Marilyn. And Frank believed, had to believe, that those months mattered, that the choice she'd made to try to save herself, even if she'd ultimately failed, was meaningful. That the brief period of authenticity and healing had been worth it, even if it hadn't lasted. Years later, when people asked Frank about Marilyn Monroe, he would usually deflect, would say something about her being talented and troubled, would acknowledge her impact on cinema and culture, would express sadness about her early death. But occasionally, with people he trusted, Frank would tell a different story, about a night when the most famous woman in the world had called him in crisis. About driving through the desert at 3 in the morning because someone he cared about needed help. about telling Marilyn Monroe the brutal truth, that she was dying. And the only way to survive was to kill the persona that was killing her. "I don't know if I helped her or hurt her," Frank would say, still grappling decades later with whether his advice had been right. "Maybe I gave her false hope. Maybe I made things worse by suggesting she could walk away from Marilyn when that was never really possible. But I had to try. I had to give her an alternative to the path she was on, because that path only had one ending." And then, invariably, Frank would get quiet, would take a drink, would stare at something the other person couldn't see. "She tried so hard," he'd say eventually. "She really tried to be herself instead of the image, and for a while it worked. For a while, she was happy as I'd seen her anyway. And that's something. Even if it didn't last, even if the darkness won in the end, that period when she was trying to save herself, when she was fighting to be real instead of a fantasy, that mattered. That meant something." The story of that night, of Marilyn Monroe begging Frank Sinatra for help and his answer changing her life, remained mostly private for decades. But those who knew both of them, who'd been close enough to witness the aftermath, understood that something profound had happened. That Frank had given Marilyn not what she'd asked for, comfort, reassurance, permission to keep being who she'd always been, but what she'd needed, a wake-up call, a challenge, a path toward authenticity that was terrifying, but possible. It hadn't saved her life permanently, but it had given her months of genuine living, of real human connection, of being herself instead of a performance. And in Hollywood, where so many people lost themselves completely in the personas they created, where authenticity was often sacrificed on the altar of fame, those months of genuine existence were a victory, however brief. Frank Sinatra had answered Marilyn Monroe's plea for help with the hardest truth anyone had ever told her. "You're dying, and the only way to live is to kill the image that's killing you." And for a brief, shining moment, Marilyn had tried. She'd tried to be Norma Jean again. She'd tried to live instead of perform. She'd tried to choose authenticity over image. It hadn't been enough, but it had been something. It had been a fight. It had been a choice to live rather than to slowly die. And Frank would carry that with him always. The knowledge that when Marilyn Monroe had needed him most, he'd given her truth instead of comfort, challenge instead of reassurance, a path toward life instead of enabling the slow suicide she'd been committing. His answer had changed her. Maybe not forever. Maybe not enough to save her in the end. But for those precious months, it had changed her. Had given her a glimpse of who she might have been if Hollywood hadn't transformed her into Marilyn Monroe. Had shown her that another way was possible, even if ultimately that way was too difficult to sustain. That was Frank's gift to Marilyn. Not salvation, but possibility. Not rescue, but a choice. And Marilyn had chosen life, even if only for a little while. That was enough. It had to be enough. The end author's note. This story is entirely fictional. While Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe did know each other and dated briefly, and while both struggled with the pressures of fame, the specific conversation and events described here are imagined. Marilyn Monroe's death in 1962 was officially ruled a probable suicide, though many questions remain. This story should not be interpreted as providing answers to historical mysteries or as depicting actual events. This is told with deep respect for both individuals and acknowledges the very real struggles with mental health, identity, and the pressures of fame that both experienced.